pair of public executions, including a political assassination, have sparked grief, outrage, and reflection across our country. Also, an inside look at a corrupt cabal which accommodates and enables lawlessness and anti-competitiveness here in South Carolina. I'm Will Folks, the owner and founding editor of FITSNews. Welcome to another edition of Your Week in Review. Let's dig in. Shortly after noon, Mountain Daylight Time, on Tuesday, September 10, 2025, conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was launching his America's Comeback Tour at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. This is a man who has built his platform on discourse, on debate, on the marketplace of ideas that is supposed to be at the center of the fabric of this country. As he addressed questions from one of the attendees at that event, Kirk was brutally murdered. A single gunshot to the neck, footage that is graphic, that has been shared all over social media. This murder, a politically targeted assassination, a public execution, has sparked grief across our country, outrage, righteous anger, and yes, insane responses from points mostly on the left side of the spectrum, but some crazy responses from points all along the political spectrum. It has been a paradigm-altering event. It's like the air around our social debate got heavier following this incident. I'm joined by our Dylan Nolan, who has led our coverage of this tragedy. Dylan, before we get into the fallout of this, before we address where this is going, which is a frightening thing to think about, first let's get into the facts of what happened. The investigation obviously has identified a suspect. There's an individual who has been arrested. Charges are imminent, according to the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, at a press conference on Friday. Where are we right now with the facts of this case, though, Dylan? What do we know about this assassination?
Sure, there was a crowd of approximately 3,000 people assembled for Kirk's American Comeback Tour. This was a speaking tour which featured debates across college campuses. Kirk was struck in the neck fatally by a high-caliber rifle round while he was fielding a question about transgender-related violence. The suspect who has been arrested at this point is 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. He's a Utah resident. He's a straight-A student. It seems as though, based off of evidence found at the crime scene, mainly inscriptions on the shell casings of rounds found still in the .30-06 rifle, that he was radicalized online. There were inscriptions which, at the time of this recording, Friday afternoon, have been reported by the New York Times, not yet confirmed by law enforcement with images or anything yet, but inscriptions such as "Notices bulge OWO." This is some sort of online furry reference, a sexualized reference. Certainly a strange thing to have in a situation like this. Bella Chow. This is apparently a reference to
Nazi hunters.
Right.
Bullets used to kill Nazis.
But then there's "If you're reading this, you're gay," which certainly there's not clear answers at the time that we're recording this as to how he was radicalized, but it's clear that he was radicalized, and it's also being reported at this time that he was communicating with other people on Discord, which is an online messaging application.
Similar to the Trump shooter.
Yes, the same one that the Trump shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania was using.
There was another bullet, though, too, Dylan. "Catch this fascist," or something along those lines.
Right. And these were all found in the rifle, which was dumped in the woods near the crime scene, which was discovered approximately 12 hours before the suspect was identified.
Right. And there was video footage, still photos, this individual on the roof before the shooting. There are videos of
Very Butler, Pennsylvania-esque. There were people in the crowd who took videos because they found it odd that they saw somebody on the roof of the building prior to the shooting.
And then in the immediate aftermath, some of the videos of the chaos, you can see someone running
and jumping off of the back of roof of the building.
correct. And the FBI, in the aftermath of this, released some of the video. FBI has been pretty transparent with what they've released regarding pictures of the person that we've since been told is Robinson, in the effort to locate him. So there has been a lot of transparency from Kash Patel's FBI. Dylan, I want to ask you this before we get into some of the motivation and things like that. Can we debunk the theories that there was foreign involvement in this? There had been reports early on about a plane with a potential assassin being flown out. Do we think that what we're dealing with is what we're being told by federal authorities? Or is there still legitimate skepticism out there that perhaps there were foreign actors involved in silencing Charlie Kirk?
One thing that was very disturbing to me after the Trump Butler shooting was that the Federal Bureau of Investigation never provided insight into what was being communicated on Discord. What was the shooter talking about? Who was he talking to? Were there foreign voices in his ear? Were there domestic voices in his ear telling him to take the shot? The American people should know that. It's disturbing to me that Trump never demanded that the American people know that, and I hope that the FBI provides some clarity in this situation because right now, the evidence that's available, I don't think one can dispositively say in one direction or the other. Now, obviously, at the time we're recording this, and we do intend to release this show earlier than usual because this story is moving so fast, that information's not available. I don't think you can conclude one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I think is worth considering as this investigation moves forward, when we look at how this individual was apprehended, according to President Donald Trump, who broke the news of the apprehension on Fox and Friends Friday morning. Apparently, his father is in law enforcement. His father helped turn him in. There was a pastor allegedly involved, a U.S. Marshal agent involved in the effort to get this individual in custody. But yeah, so many times, Dylan, when something of this magnitude, and again, we mentioned in the open how this is just a heavy situation, not just the climate in which it occurred, the graphic nature of this public execution, but the reaction to it, the visceral reaction to it. And I think in some cases, visceral is probably the appropriate reaction. But given all of those charged motions and feelings after this, to think that it could be the work of one person with a grudge. I mean, people do have a tendency to want to blow things up because the tragedy is so big, the fallout's so big. It's
It
hard to
hurts to
attribute it.
think that a guy who, like Kirk, you might like him, you might not like him, but to think that one person could get an idea in their mind or be radicalized online and make a decision to take that person out of this world, it's hard to believe, but it certainly could be what happened here.
Yeah,
I think that we should keep an open mind until we see enough evidence to know one way or the other what happened.
yeah,
I especially when we're operating a news
yeah,
outlet here, it's on us to not
yeah,
amplify things before we know that they're true.
yeah.
And I think that's exactly what we need to do here. But as you say, I don't think we can close the door to foreign involvement.
Mhm.
Um, but there's certainly no proof of that either at this point.
Yeah, and certainly there were allegations hurled at the state of Israel because in his final appearance on Ben Shapiro's show, Charlie Kirk had offered some comments that some had viewed as a shot at Israel, claiming that we
Well, it's
need.
more than this final appearance. Charlie Kirk, for years, was very much so a vocal supporter of Israel after the October 7th attack on Israel and Israel's subsequent response in Gaza, which, of course, continues to be highly controversial the way that they've conducted that conflict. He had backed Israel very much
Yeah,
so, very strongly. And only in the last couple of months, I think the Epstein case and Epstein's clear ties through Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell to the Israeli intelligence services, he was honest about that. He was speaking about it. And that, of course, is something that threatens the very existence of the state of Israel, because if you believe that, you believe that they're blackmailing people and they're doing truly horrific things. So, yes, he certainly was changing his tune on the state of Israel, which has led a lot of people to speculate. But once again, I think at this point, yes, there was a plane that left and turned off its transponder, yes,
mm.
but also I don't
But it
think we
might
have
also
any.
be what it seems.
It also might be
Yeah,
what it seems, right? We don't
yeah,
have dispositive
yeah.
evidence either way, and I don't think it benefits anybody to get out over your skis, but I
Well,
think it benefits everybody to keep an open mind.
we certainly won't pull an MSNBC and claim that this was a Kirk supporter just randomly firing off a gun. Could you believe that in the immediate aftermath of the shooting?
Right. We're talking minutes after this shooting, there was a host who went on MSNBC and said that this could have been one of Kirk's own supporters.
Unbelievable.
It was incredibly stupid. I do have some grace for this guy because I understand, I've been on live air and said things which you you probably think better of. But at the same time, if you're going to be doing live television broadcasting for one of the biggest networks in the world, you
I don't know if they're
probably
one
ought
of the
to,
biggest networks anymore.
well, but you probably ought to keep your head on your shoulders, especially in a moment like that. I mean, we're more
Yeah.
professional than that talking to a YouTube audience.
Well, let's talk about the fallout, Dylan, because there has been, and again, I want to point out that while there have been crazy responses, as I mentioned, most coming from the far left celebrating this. This logo we're going to put up here, Kristen Hawkins, another person who goes on college campuses and tries to have this free flowing debate this. I mean, this is just awful. This T-shirt here, but we've seen responses like that. But I do want to say that from people in positions of political power, people who are in leadership positions, I do think that whether it's local, state, federal, there has been universal condemnation of this, and I think that's important. Even Gavin Newsom said it's
Former
a murder.
President Barack Obama released a great statement condemning it. Yeah, it's across the board. Anybody with any sense.
So yeah, we're seeing some unity, at least in the top level response. But then when we start getting down into some of these other responses, and Dylan, you did a report yesterday on a school teacher in Greenville, South Carolina. Tell us
Former
about.
Greenville civics teacher, social studies teacher, was posting about how he believed that America was made greater by Charlie Kirk's assassination.
And he no longer has a job. Is that correct?
I mean, this was something that rapidly got back to the parents at the school district. You could go on their Facebook page and they had posted something else about a professional development event they were doing with some of their administrators. And you see the comments are just all related to this teacher and his comments and demanding that the administration do something. And that then made its way to multiple South Carolina elected officials, many of whom are currently running for elected office and are vying for their time in the media spotlight. And it did not take long for the district to place him on administrative leave,
Yeah.
presumably so that they could confirm the authenticity of the posts. And within a couple of hours after that, they released a statement saying that he is no longer employed.
Yeah, Congressman William Timmons was very aggressive in pushing that. The Freedom Caucus, which ironically was running against Timmons in his last race, were very aggressive in pushing that. But we've also seen Clemson University, which is, again, one of the more, I guess some would say, woke campuses. They're all woke these days to some extent, but Clemson, under a lot of pressure for some comments made by several of its teachers, to our knowledge, none of these folks have lost their jobs yet.
And I do think there's a different standard in a high school or a middle school versus a university. I think when you're talking to younger and more impressionable people, how much of your personal political views you can bring into the workplace. I think that there's a far lower bar for that being unacceptable in a high school. That
Because
being
they're teaching kids, not other adults.
right, and also you're required by law to be there. When you go to a university, you're choosing to enroll, and there's an expectation that especially tenured professors have the ability to say things that might be controversial because that's the whole point of a university. However, I think there's a line where when you're talking about a political assassination and justifying that and gloating about it, and I think
Yeah.
that becomes unacceptable.
Well, and Dylan, there's also the free speech angle. We were dogged out a little bit today for highlighting some of these things. And they say, well, what about free speech? Well, the speech is free. You can say what you want.
Nobody's arguing that, Dr. Melvin Errol-Villiver, who we're talking about at Clemson, nobody's saying that he should go to jail.
Yeah.
But should he still be an employee of Clemson University?
Yeah. Employers don't have to put up with
And
it.
he's not a tenured professor, he's an
Yeah.
assistant professor. So whatever tenure protections that Clemson University might have, those don't apply to him.
Yeah. And South Carolina also a right to work state. So
And at the time of
yeah.
recording, Clemson, we put in a request for comment, as have, I'm sure, many other media outlets yesterday. We're recording this on Friday. The university still has not released a statement on his employment status.
Now, one of the craziest responses that I've seen, and I spent 2 years at Presbyterian College, Dylan, and when I went there, it was Presbyterian. You think, okay, it's a fairly conservative school in the rural region of South Carolina, Clinton, South Carolina, kind of between Columbia and Greenville. But a professor at Presbyterian has written a column in the aftermath called Dying to Be Men, in which she blames Kirk's death on Kirk and on what she refers to as white male insecurity. She also said specifically, Dylan, that, quote, trans people pose the biggest threat, again, to Kirk and other white males, because they show that biological sex and gender are distinct categories and that gender identity is constructed. This takes all of the power away from having a penis. Again, unacceptable to the white patriarchy, she says. It is unbelievable where people are going with this. She literally claims that violent white American masculinity poses one of this country's biggest threats, calling people in Charlie Kirk's line of work part of a, quote, radical death cult. Now, are these kind of arguments that you make to a guy's got his neck blown off hosting a free exchange of ideas? That's the kind of...
Yeah, this is not appropriate, and it's pretty insane. And we should talk about, okay, we say the standards of what you can say at a high school versus a college. Okay, well, let's talk about a public university versus a private college. There's, I think, a strong argument that private schools should have a lot more latitude to control the ideology of those who work there. And I would be surprised if Presbyterian colleges alumni or board think that this is appropriate.
Yeah. Well, we are in a marketplace of ideas, Dylan, and one of the things I think is...
And that's one of the things that Charlie Kirk stood for.
Yeah, and it's something, again, FITSNews. I was not a huge follower of Charlie Kirk. I obviously knew who he was, respected the work he did on college campuses. And I do want to point out that this tour he was embarking on, pretty critical if you look at the direction of the youth in America and how it had started to literally, like the name of his group, Turning Point. He was effectuating a shift in the way people think by simply challenging these thoughts. And yes, he did it in an aggressive way. I mean, not everything this guy said was 100% above boards. Nothing all of us say is 100% correct.
As I said about the MSNBC host who put his foot in his mouth, if you talk in front of cameras all the time, you're not
You're
going to
gonna
say
screw
the
up.
right thing every single time.
But to think that somebody who dedicated his career to that type of platform, somebody, again, like we said, Kristen Hawkins, whose entire platform is based on the discussion, on the conversation. Because Dylan, you know as well as I do that one of two things is going to happen when you turn your mic over to other people. You're either going to learn something you didn't know and your viewpoint is going to be strengthened, or they're going to look like an idiot and you're going to look smarter. Neither one of those things is bad. Neither one of those things is bad. But we've lost that in this culture. And again, I thought some of the comments by Utah's governor were interesting. He told people, get off social media for a while.
Touch grass.
Go touch grass and ground yourself. And there's something to that. And I think there is a responsibility that we have, which you talked about as we cover events like these, not to descend into craziness like this woman from Presbyterian College, but to find the facts, honestly assess the facts, and then take it from there. And sometimes that's a place of swift reprisal. I hope this guy gets the death penalty. Don't know exactly what Utah's specific aggravating factors are for it, but I think this would probably fit. But we've got to start somewhere, Dylan.
We've got to start somewhere, and I think an honest assessment of the facts, we've got to figure out how do we address as families and as parents people being radicalized online. Whether it's people being pulled to the far left or to the far right. And we, to be honest, as we're recording this, I still am trying to parse out, the information that's available to figure out which directions this guy was getting pulled in. But obviously, he was spending a lot of time online, and it's led multiple people at this point. Whether you want to look at the Nashville shooting, you want to look at the recent Catholic Church shooting. These are all people who you could call terminally online who end up doing extremely destructive things.
Yeah.
And well, as we said with the transgender issue, as we say with this, we have to have an honest conversation about how do we get here and how do we leave before we just start beating each other up left and right again.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that very dynamic, I want to go to a post that Charlie Kirk made less than 24 hours before he was murdered. And it was a post that he made about this graphic stabbing just north of us in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is something that even before Kirk's murder was, again, sparking grief, sparking outrage. A career criminal released numerous times from custody on violent charges, set free and literally execute someone publicly, stabbing this Ukrainian refugee in the neck, murdering her on this Charlotte train. And, Dylan, that's the kind of thing that we have fought for years here. And we're going to talk about in the next segment with Jen Wood about the quest for accountability over a broken judicial system. But Charlie Kirk was calling that out. He said, America will never be the same. He had no idea how right he was. But as we look at that Charlotte case, I mean, is it not a similar turning point?
Shortly after that murder, which I reported on, I attended a meeting of the Lexington County GOP, and it was a candidates forum, and one of the local candidates spoke about mental health care facilities and the need for us as a state to do something which is expensive, but which clearly is necessary, which is to reopen long-term facilities for those who are found incompetent to stand trial. Um, he just happened to have experience with this through his line of work, and he was talking about how it's just not acceptable that folks who can't stand trial because they're mentally not right are then released back onto the streets by the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. And yes, like as you say, it's tough to have conversations about people being murdered, especially when it gets politicized and people are using it to score points and slam dunk on people. But that's a really important conversation that we need to have if we don't want people to keep being killed senselessly. And as Charlie Kirk said, when the discourse ends, the violence begins. And we need to keep having the discourse because the violence is going to get us nowhere. It's getting us nowhere. As we reflect on this, I think Charlie Kirk said it very well. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. And that's kind of trite, but the high road I think is the only road to take after a situation like this. If you're watching this and you're on the right, I don't think a violent response. I don't think a aggressive response. Obviously we've got to keep talking. We've got to keep using our words. We've got to keep demanding accountability when people put horrific ideas out there into the world and talk about how they're bad ideas. But to hop in the mud and join the fray and of the blood and bullets, that only takes us down a very dark road.
Absolutely right. Folks, keep it tuned to FITSNews, where the conversation that Dylan just mentioned is always going to be advanced, and all perspectives are invited, even the crazy ones like this. But count on us to continue to advance the open microphone that was at the center of Charlie Kirk's mission. So clearly across our country, but particularly here in South Carolina, we need a justice overhaul, a top to bottom reimagining of the way that we administer justice here, particularly in South Carolina. We've talked about the big case in Charlotte, but also in South Carolina. Back in May of this year, 22-year-old Logan Federico brutally murdered by a career criminal who had no business being on the streets. It's a tale that FITSNews has told countless times over the last half decade as we have pushed for the very reform that is desperately needed in South Carolina. But standing in the way of that reform, standing in the way of fixing how we choose our judges, standing in the way of tougher sentencing, tougher bonds, are the trial lawyers, particularly the lawyer legislators who run this corrupt cabal in the Palmetto State. It's a danger to competitiveness economically, but more importantly, it is a danger to public safety. But this racket, folks, they have run this show for decades. South Carolina, as you may not know, years ago used to be run by Democrats. It was all white Democrats who ran the show in the Palmetto State. Now, when that worm started turning back in the mid-1990s, the early part of this century, trial lawyers have continued to exert outsized influence over the South Carolina General Assembly. We see it in their puppeteering of leaders in the legislature like Merle Smith, Speaker of the South Carolina House. We're going to get to him in a few weeks, folks, trust me. But we are talking about an insidious, incestuous cabal, people. And something that this media outlet has committed to calling out, again, for many years. But I'm joined now by our Jen Wood, our Director of Research. Jen, you've followed this process now for several years yourself. Been about 4 years since you've been with FITSNews covering all this stuff. But you have been digging deep in recent weeks because obviously we've received reports about the moneyed influence of this trial lawyer lobby, about the massive amounts of cash that they have dumped into the political class here in the Palmetto State. But you've done some actual work on the numbers. And I want to point out these are just numbers that are publicly available. There's a lot that's not publicly available. But as this debate in the last few months over lawsuit reform, as it was making its way through South Carolina General Assembly, Jen Wood, walk us through some of the contributions that you uncovered.
So, I hate politics, but I love data and I also hate corruption.
Yes. Yeah.
So, when we started looking at this, took a hot second and thought, all right, let's look at these senators who were key to what happened with tort reform, with the legislation.
Which was an overwhelming trial lawyer victory.
Exactly.
Yeah, the defeat of a comprehensive
Right.
reform bill. Yes.
So I started digging into donations from trial lawyers to senators. And in 2024 and 2025, when that debate was heating up and it was critical, $1.1 million was donated from law firms and attorneys to senators alone.
Just senators.
Just
Not
senators.
House members.
I have not even gotten into the House members.
1.1 million?
Yes,
And there's only 46 of these senators.
46.
Who'd you find, Jen? Who's in this
These
list?
campaigns, these campaign accounts are flush with money now, and I think Senator Tom Fernandez. I think we want to throw to his clip because that's kind of what tipped us off to look into these donations.
Absolutely. Let's roll this clip of Senator Tom Fernandez on the floor of the state Senate earlier this year during the debate over tort reform.
Now, here's the quiet part out loud. Did you know that the trial lawyer lobby has offered me campaign fundraisers in the amount of $50,000 to $100,000 per campaign if I voted against this? Did you know that?
I was not aware of that, sir.
And did you know that
Senate will suspend. President, I move that we go in. I would just caution this. Let's caution the body. Stand at ease momentarily.
Jen, it's pretty funny how quickly they shut that down.
That's what I noticed. It was like, everybody mic drop.
But I want to point something before we go into these numbers. I want to point out Tom Fernandez. A lot of folks, when we posted this clip originally, they said, "Oh, this guy's a hero. He's standing up against the trial lawyer lobby." No. He said the quiet part out loud, yes, but then he proceeded to do what these status quo politicians always do and vote in the interest of those trial lawyers. But Jen, we'll get to him in a minute. What'd you find with some of these other lawmakers?
We are going to start out with Senator Mike Gambrell, who previously, in previous iterations of this bill, was a supporter of it. So in 2024, 2025, and I'm looking at my sheet here because a lot of numbers, they don't all stick. Gambrell received $20,750 from attorneys and law firms, which is an 800 increase over the prior.
800%, right?
Yeah, 800% increase over the prior time period.
Wow.
So, despite his support, he ended up with the trial lawyers.
After getting all that money.
Like, there's a switch. Senator Josh Kimbrell, who's
Oh, boy.
slightly, I guess we can, embattled. Would we call him embattled now?
He's accused of stealing $2 million from his former business partner.
Yeah, there's a whole lot going on there.
And has been sanctioned by a circuit court judge.
Yes.
Who found those allegations to be substantive. But anyway, continue.
So Kimbrell, who's once the face of this reform, collected over $20,000, and he switched his vote. So, all of a sudden, he's in the pocket.
Well, and not only that, you mentioned Gambrell being a sponsor of one of these bills earlier. Kimbrell sponsored a standalone tort reform bill, which he then refused to support after getting. It's like, dude, it's your bill.
You know what's happening.
Oh. What else did you find, Jen?
All right, Carlisle Kennedy, you actually did a report about this, but let's bring that back up. $25,000 in just 7 weeks at the height of this debate.
Yeah,
From
he held a fundraiser while this was on the floor.
yes,
While it was on the floor. Oh, man.
yes. Matt Lieber, another one,
We keep laughing at these names. but
over $20,000 from attorneys and law firms.
unbelievable.
Now, okay, so my favorite is Senator Overture Walker. His donations from law firms and attorneys alone in 2024 and 2025 exceeded $100,000.
Unbelievable.
It's unreal.
Well, let's go back. I want to go back to Lieber, though, because you talked about all the money he got from the trial lawyer
Mhm.
lobby. Let's not forget that it was the affair allegations against him leveled by his wife, who's a public official herself, Charleston School Board member Michelle Lieber, who identified his alleged mistress and a campaign staffer, paid staffer, who was also very closely linked to one of the trial lawyer's top mouthpieces here in South Carolina, political consultant Chris Slick. And this group, this political network affiliated with Slick, also Josh Kimbrell, part of that network too. So it's very interesting that the alleged mistress affiliated with Matt Lieber is also tied in with this group, and we've been digging on that too. But Jen, let me ask you about this total number that we're talking about, this $1.1 million. Obviously, that's a huge chunk of money to go to members of the Senate. Again, you're only talking about one
Mm-hmm.
half of the legislature, the much smaller body in terms of numerical size. But this isn't all the money.
No.
This is just the money we know about. I mean, we mentioned Chris Slick a moment ago. He was part of a group called the Palmetto Truth Project during the previous election cycle, which raised and spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, targeting conservative lawmakers in the South Carolina House. Now, there's a new group run by a guy named Joel Sawyer, former gubernatorial press secretary, that is also running these similar attack ads against some of these conservative members. Trial lawyer money, likely a big part of that push. So we see the numbers in black and white in these campaign finance reports, but that is by no means the extent of this corrosive influence.
Right. And if you look at the trial lawyers political action committee, South Carolina Association for Justice, now their donations to senators and representatives were not huge. 2024, 2025, they were, I think, around 202,000. But if
Wait a
you,
minute, hold on. 202,000 is not huge?
well, I mean, well, compared to the 1.1
Yeah.
million to senators alone,
Right.
but if you look at how they are structured, they don't just have one political action committee; they have got 10,
Yeah.
and they're called Justice PAC 1 through Justice PAC 10. They all have the same address. This is all perfectly legal, but what that
Right.
means is they can donate more than the allowed
Yeah.
amount,
Yeah.
and it's totally fine.
Well, here's the other thing to think about. We talk about this money, the individual contributions, the contributions from this PAC, these shadow dark money groups that are running around. Let's not forget the money that trial lawyers dumped into the MAGA influencers
Mhm.
during this debate. You saw a ton of the far right voices coming out parroting trial lawyer talking points. That didn't come cheap. But there's another profit source for this powerful interest that we got to talk about, Jen, and that is these lawyer legislators who are appointing the judges in South Carolina, who are then appearing in front of the same judges they appoint, who, by the way, they set their salaries, set their budgets. They can hire them, they can fire them. And as our friend David Pascoe has said, that's not independence when you got somebody that can hire, fire, and set your budget. Although, I want to point this out. We put this out last week. David Pascoe himself receiving a ton of contributions from this same lobby. And again, I guess they're hedging their bets. They're trying to play both sides of this issue. But Jen, I mean, it is a mountain of money, but it's not just the money, it's the power that they wield
Right.
over the process. It's
Right.
being able to go to a client and say, hey, if you hire me instead of that guy, I can get you off for sure. And oh, by the way, it's going to be 5 or 6 times whatever the rate of that other guy.
Exactly.
I mean, they're hiring these people specifically for bond hearings in front of certain judges. We
Yes.
talked about that. Todd Rutherford is a prime offender on that front. being hired for these one-off hearings just to get people bonds. That is where, to me, the real potential for corruption is. And I know you've got a big series coming up, Jim. We're not going to get into the details of that on this show, but you've got a big series where you are showing where some of those real profit centers are for some of
Yeah.
these powerful lawyer
And
legislators.
how it affects not only the lawyer legislators, it is attorneys outside of that little network.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It is. I'm shocked at what I found. I cannot wait to launch this series.
Yeah, and they don't want to be clear, these trial lawyers, they don't want the system to change at all. Their goal here is to maintain the status quo because it has worked for them, again, for decades.
Hmm.
Back when the Democrats were running the show, and now that Republicans, I'm using my air quotes here, have a supermajority, ostensibly. And I think what's also interesting, we got to talk about the political dynamics of this and how quickly they shifted this year. Because if we go back to February of this year, Majority Leader Shane Massey, who was the lead sponsor of this massive lawsuit reform bill, he was talking tough with
Yeah.
the trial lawyer leaders in the hearings. He said, "Look, we tried to work with you. You don't want to work with us? Whatever. We got a new jury now," he said, talking about the newly configured state Senate, which was full of people he helped elect.
Right.
His caucus got these people in office. He thought they were going to stick with him, but that trial lawyer dollar, the almighty trial lawyer dollar, too much, wasn't it, Jen?
Yeah. Clearly they knew exactly what they had to do and who they had to give money to get that
Yeah.
bill watered down.
Folks, don't ever lose sight of the consequences of this. We talked about it a moment ago. This is not just a lack of economic competitiveness. This is not just South Carolina being a state where literally businesses are afraid to locate unless we bribe them, of course, with crony capitalist handouts. It's not just about the economic angle. It is about the case of Logan Federico. It is about all these cases that we've covered where prosecutors going up against these powerful lawyer legislators have wilted, or judges have been afraid to do the right thing. And again, I want to say something to the judges out there. A lot of you want to do the right thing. I don't think it's your fault. I think in far too many cases, there's pressure being placed on these judges that simply shouldn't be there. It simply shouldn't be there. And so I don't think it's all your fault, judges. I think that this system, in many ways, I think a lot of you judges might want it fixed because this is no way to run a judiciary, Jen. It's got to be independent. And right now, our judiciary is an annex of the legislature.
I wouldn't want to be in charge of a case as a judge where I couldn't rule according to the law because I have my boss in front of me. Just think about that.
We're going to watch that play out, Jen, this coming year. There's an election for the state Supreme Court. And Justice John Few, who upset some lawmakers when he refused to sign off on their unconstitutional pay raise, when he made them go back and actually articulate what their standard was on this abortion ban that they passed. They're pissed at him, and they're going to install one of their former cronies, Jay Lucas, as a justice on the Supreme Court. Go ahead. Mark my words. This race is over, folks. Few is going to get beat. Jay Lucas, the former Speaker of the South Carolina House, is going to beat him. And it is going to be, again, trial lawyers puppeteering the judiciary through the legislative branch.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's definitionally insane. And they're going to do this at a time when they know the lights are on. They know that they're under scrutiny. They know that people are onto them and watching them. They don't care.
They don't care.
They got so much money, they're going to do whatever the hell they want. And you know what? They target outlets like us when we step out of line, these lawsuits that get hurled in our direction. But Jen, you've done amazing work on this. I want to thank you. This is something that's got to be exposed.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep exposing it. I'm not going to stop.
Damn right. As we mentioned, far too much at stake, whether it's the competitiveness of the state economically or whether it is the safety of our communities. Jen Wood, excellent work. Keep it tuned to FITSNews as we continue to hold this corrupt cabal accountable. Folks, that is a wrap for this week's show. I want to thank everyone for joining us again on a special edition of the Week in Review. If you believe in continuing conversations like this, if you believe that independent, unapologetic media outlets that seek the truth and our best conception of what to make of it, we hope you will support our efforts. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our media outlet as we continue not only the search for truth, but the all-important conversation that follows from it. We'll catch you next time on the Week in Review.